Welcome everyone to this parallel event by the International Coalition for the Abolition of Surrogate Motherhood. My name is Clara Berglund and I am the Secretary General of the Swedish Women's Lobby, which is an independent umbrella organization for the women's movement in Sweden, and we are also a proud member of the coalition. Surrogate motherhood is incompatible with women's full human rights and gender equality. During last year, the closed borders and restrictions due to COVID-19 has further revealed the exploitative nature of this global industry that profits on vulnerable women. Tonight, we will listen to interventions from 3 experts that will discuss the medical, psychological, and legal consequences of surrogacy, as well as what can be done to stop this growing trade in women and children. We will hear from Anna Subina, who is the policy coordinator of the European Network of Migrant Women, and she will talk about the links between migration and trafficking and surrogacy. Welcome, Anna. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Clara. And thank you, the 2 speakers before me. And it is, of course, always extremely difficult to speak about such an intellectual giant as Jagmor. So I will try to do my best. And I will try to build on something that Jagmor was presenting. In particular, I think in her opening, she said that there is no such thing as a single issue feminism. There is no such thing as a single issue oppression. We work as an intersectional organization. And this is my approach in this presentation to the issue of surrogacy. So first of all, let me introduce the organization that I represent. We are a migrant women-led platform based in Europe. Our members are grassroots organizations, mostly service providers. And we are an organization and a platform that recognizes prostitution, pornography, trafficking, as well as surrogacy as forms of violence against women and sexual and reproductive exploitation of women. We are a member in the Coalition for the Abolition of Surrogacy, and we joined relatively recently, and we're very proud and eager to be the members because we are a proactive organization. And what I mean by this is that we work on the issues that are known and widely recognized, such as, for example, the issue of forced marriage or female genital mutilation, that of course, a while ago was not recognized as a form of violence against women, but thankfully now it is. But we also work on the emerging issues, those issues that we identify that present a serious threat in the near future for our target group, who are the migrant and refugee women. And surrogacy is one of such issues. We also, by being proactive, that means that we do not wait until women become harmed in such quantities that would entitle us to present our cases before the court, but we rather use our experiential knowledge in our feminist analysis to forecast certain scenarios that can be favorable or unfavorable or harmful to migrant women. And for this reason, we have launched a joint research with CIAMS, with the Coalition for Abolition of Prostitution, and we will be presenting the results, hopefully, in the near future on this subject. So what surrogacy has to do with migration? First of all, let me tell you how we view migration. Migration for us is a broad term. It's a broad definition that encompasses economic migrants, women who migrate for family reunification or education, those who are forcefully displaced, including internally displaced persons, refugees, undocumented women who lost or maybe never had their status, legal status, and as well as women of second generation born in Europe. So it is in this understanding of the complexity of migration experience and the abuses of human rights that proliferate around the area of our work, which is migration and women. And indeed, in conjunction with our values and positions, which are feminist values and positions, that we are looking at the issue of surrogacy. Our positions, I already mentioned earlier that we view prostitution, obviously trafficking for all purposes, all exploitation as a form of violence against women, but we pay specific attention to sexual and reproductive exploitation. That, of course, we view as a root of patriarchal oppression and control over women, but also what we know, statistically speaking, in the European Union, sexual exploitation, and sexual exploitation is always at the intersection with reproductive exploitation, is the most widespread form of exploitation and violence against migrant women. Now, we know that there is a certain invitation from certain organizations like the International Labour Organization, who would like to count exploitation and prostitution as a form of labor exploitation. We disagree with this, and we think that sexual exploitation as well as reproductive exploitation should be statistically disaggregated in a different category. So this is our approach. Additionally, we view sexual and reproductive exploitation as well as trafficking as a demand-driven market, right? Demand and supply, of course. So where there is a demand, there will be generated a supply. And we know from, for example, the situation in the institution of prostitution, that who is mostly exploited in Europe, it is the migrant women. Now, with regards to surrogacy concretely and its links with trafficking and the situation of migrant and refugee women. First of all, let's be reminded that surrogacy is not a new phenomenon. It is not new form of violence against women. In fact, it is one of the oldest forms of exploitation of women. So listen to this. Sarah and Abraham were married, but couldn't conceive a child on their own. So Sarah turned to her slave, Hagar, to be a mother of Abraham's child. Well, we all know, or maybe most of us know where this comes from. It is not something new. It's actually the book of Genesis. And what is more interesting, that this is a quote from actually the website called surrogate.com. So what changed now, of course, is not the fact that some other woman would carry a child for a woman who is either unable or not willing to carry a child, but rather the method of making this woman pregnant. And so now we have the reproductive technologies and companies and big clinics coming into this business of surrogacy. But let's be reminded that this is not the case everywhere. In some countries in the world, and there are a lot of them, there's still what the surrogate.com describes as traditional surrogacy, which means raping a woman, is still prevalent. For example, in Libya, where there are women who are trying to reach Europe from sub-Saharan Africa, and we know that overwhelming majority of them are already victims of sexual violence and rape and various forms of other violence, they become trapped in these so-called baby factories before they reach Europe. What happens with these women? They're being kept there, they're being systematically raped, they're being prostituted, but they're also being raped with the purpose of impregnating them in order then to take their children and sell them on the actual slave market. This is what's happening in Libya, and we know this is documented. Similar cases there are in Nigeria, where there are, again, they call it the clinics, the maternity clinics. Effectively, they function as a baby factories, and sometimes women are delivered there and they're repeatedly raped. Sometimes they are delivered there when they're already pregnant and they were raped previously. But the point is that they're kept in those clinics in order to extract their babies and put them on sale. What also we need to consider when we speak about surrogacy and migration, of course, a woman doesn't need to be a migrant to be a victim of exploitation through surrogacy. Just like a woman does not to be a migrant to be a victim of exploitation in the system of prostitution. However, and I already mentioned it before, in Europe, and this is a statistically provable fact, the overwhelming majority of those persons who are found in the system of prostitution, particularly in the countries where it has been legalized, but also in those where it is semi-regulated, or even in the countries that installed the Nordic model that punishes the sex buyers, the overwhelming majority of women in prostitution, they're migrant women. They can be women from Eastern Europe, from within Europe. So legally speaking, they're not migrants. They would be described as third country, as European mobile citizens. But very often they also come from outside of European Union. And what are the categories of women who are most at risk of these forms of exploitation? We have internally displaced women. So, for example, there are cases of, this is outside of Europe, but we have documented cases of Myanmar where women are trafficked to China, and we know that there is demand, there is a bride trade going on, and in parallel with being sold into, being a wife, women are also exploited in surrogacy. We know that there are, according to some local organization in Myanmar, there are in some provinces of China between 15 to 20,000 women who are currently kept in captivity as brides. What we do not know is how many of them are exploited through surrogacy as well, but we know that the possibility of this is very real. Women who are seeking asylum, another category of women who may be in the refugee camp, who are in desperate economic and legal circumstances, who would be targeted by those traffickers who recruit women in order to exploit them through surrogacy. The ordinary migrant women who arrive, and they of course struggle to find employment in Europe, and they are being pushed into poverty. Undocumented women and women without citizenship. Now, think about this category. In Lebanon, you have in the refugee camps the whole generation of young girls who are born in the camps who have no citizenship whatsoever. Those girls do not exist on paper. How easy it is to target those girls in order to recruit them for what is growing demand globally for the market of surrogacy. Then we have women who are victims of forced marriage. The overlap, the intersection between forced marriage and the bride trade is absolutely clear, as is verifiable already through the cases that we have both in Europe and outside of Europe. And of course, the women exploited in prostitution and the trafficked women, who will be also the first targets. And the examples are many, but what I want to go back to the point in which I started, and which actually Jagmar emphasized about not being, it's not a one issue. Surrogacy does not exist independently as some independent, I see you, Clara, thank you, form of exploitation. Recognition of the links between prostitution and the sexual exploitation, as well as the recognition with the links of forced marriage and surrogacy is very, very important. And I'm going to finish this by just highlighting the recent, well, relatively recent example from Greece, where there was a trafficking ring was busted with a profit at that point of about 500,000, who were recruiting the women from within the European Union. So there were mostly women from Bulgaria, but also women from Russia and from Ukraine, who were then brought to Greece and kept in those fertility clinics, right? And what we have here is a triple exploitation. So some women were brought already as pregnant, and their kids were taken for illegal adoption. Some other women were brought and exploited, impregnated, and they were made to carry a child. And at the same time, the same women were used to extract their eggs for sale. Yeah, we all heard, of course, about the situation in Ukraine. There were recent arrests in Russia, and that's the country where I come from, where surrogacy is legalized. And we are keeping a very close eyes on this development because the loopholes in legislations are numerous. And I'm particularly grateful for the recent resolution of the European Parliament that actually recognized that trafficking for surrogacy specifically constitute a specific form of violence against women. And we all have to be alerted and combat this form of violence and exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Do you want to add something about that as well, like just the racism within surrogacy?
Well, every industry that exploits women is also racist. I do not know anyone that is not racist. You know, I always go back to the most obvious example is, of course, pornography and prostitution, where you have within the industry of exploitation. So you already have all this scale of exploitation, and then there are different women positioned, right? So depending on your preferences, whether you want a submissive Asian woman who, not being submissive now, just got murdered, 6 of them in Atlanta, whether you want to have the Russian super hot wives who will do everything for you, whether you want to have a hot Latina. So the categorization, the racist and racialized categorizations and kind of stereotypization and fetishization is absolutely at the core of this specific exploitation of women, which is pornography. And as I said, this is sexual exploitation. It is never disconnected from the reproductive exploitation. So what Jagmo just mentioned, the choosing of babies, this is the most obvious example, the skin color, the eye color, the background. I mean, this is like a catalog. You open and you choose. And, you know, the couples, interestingly, there are all of this, it's not just white people from America who would choose, for example, Nepalese women as surrogates because they have a lighter skin color, the Nepalese women who are trafficked from Nepal into India, right? But there is also, you know, the Arab customers who would choose women from Ukraine because it's fashionable to have a little bit lighter skin babies. So it's all very, on a global scale of this racist dynamics, surrogacy fits so perfectly to satisfy the racist demands, which are the, you know, the patriarchal demands, of course.
Thank you, Anna. Also, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit what you think would be the long-term implications for migrant women if surrogacy was to be legalized.
Oh, well, it will be a disaster. It will be a disaster, just the same disaster as you have in Germany legalizing prostitution. any industry of exploitation that exploits women, that becomes legalized and normalized, and then institutionalized. This is the next step, because, you know, industry always seeks for profit. So you might start with one little clinic here and there, and then you realize, oh, there is more demand. We can serve customers arriving from other countries here. So the demand keeps growing. And even if it's not, it will be artificially generated because the industry needs income. And then they will need a supply. And supply will come from the poorest countries, from the poorest women, and the migrant women will be first who will be, I mean, they will either be trafficked for purpose of exploitation and surrogacy, or they will migrate for some other reasons, and then they will be exploited in surrogacy. But I really do think that surrogacy is the next frontier for feminists. Maybe not the next, but the now, the urgent one. We know enough about prostitution. We can put numbers and figures and arguments on the table. You know, nobody is going to say, oh no, it's so wonderful because in Germany they legalized it and it just eliminated all violence against women and brought trafficking down. We know this is not the case. We have 10 years or more to prove the case. And the same with Netherlands. And that's why we see this slowly the turn towards the Nordic model, because more countries starting to realize that it's intrinsically harmful. There is nothing that is going to make this industry not harmful if we legalize it. We don't have such arguments and such kind of experience with the industry of surrogacy yet, and it's coming. And that's why, you know, what I was speaking, that we're trying to be a proactive organization. We don't want to wait until we have so many babies abandoned because they have disabilities, so many mothers with dissociative disorders, and so many court cases. We want to prevent it. And going in the path of legalization, the commercial legalization will be an absolute disaster in terms of considering the current global context of wars, displacement, the natural disasters, the climate disasters, and all the women who are being stranded in different parts, you know, looking for better life, looking for income. This will be an invitation for exploitation for this industry to groom them, to target them, to traffic them, and to exploit them. That's it.
Thank you, Anna. I was thinking, since you mentioned prostitution several times, and also talked about the importance of recognizing the supply and demand that's feeding into the surrogacy industry, do you think that we could have the same approach as we've had when it comes to prostitution to surrogacy, as in prohibiting surrogacy clinics and bureaus, and also surrogacy purchase? Or do you have any other ideas about how to legally come about attacking this industry?
Is it a question to me?
Yes.
Well, yes, absolutely. We have to take a very clear stance, a human rights-based stance, based on the universal human rights and women's rights in particular, that human beings are not for sale, and women are included, as long as we think that women are human beings, that they should not be exploited in this industry. And the only way to enforce it legally is to legally punish those people who are promoting this practice or actually practicing this, as well as those who are seeking to purchase babies. It must be made crystal clear through the legislation that there is no such thing as a positive right to have a baby. No one, not one single person is entitled to have a baby. We may all sympathize and empathize with somebody who, for various reasons, might not be able to carry a child, or it's a gay couple, or it's a woman who cannot get pregnant. This does not give anyone a right, a positive right, to acquire a child. And the similar way as, you know, if you actually ban surrogacy in one country, the persons, whether a couples, man or woman, who try to pursue this internationally, go into another jurisdiction, which is what's happening right now in Ukraine and Russia and Latin America and Canada, they should be made legally punishable by the law of the country to which they belong, where they have citizenship. This is what I think. It will be a very strong and clear message. Yes.
Yes, that's very clear. Thank you, Anna. Thank you to all of our speakers and to all of you that have been listening for this event. And I hope that you will join our common struggle to fight surrogacy industry, as it is one of the most urgent threats to women's human rights and also a form of violence against women, as has been described so many times tonight. So thank you all.